And welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast, Netflix and Kill Edition.
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Now this is going to be an interesting Netflix and Kill because technically this is one of our first review. I guess our first review that doesn't quite technically have a kill in it.
Someone dies.
I mean, it has a death.
There are kills just not on screen. They do talk about killing.
Unless you want to, unless we want to get into spoilers, I think that we could maybe make it count later. But that'll have to be saved for another...
Not that we've ever, broken the rules on this before.
But who's talking about rule breaking and not really sticking to format? Why, it's me, Nick, the Merc with a mic, and my fellow Unapologist.
Travis.
And our guest Unapologist.
Justin Zarian.
And yes, Justin, we've had Justin on again because we again had a kind of a last-minute Hail Mary here, and we wanted to talk a lot about Gerald's game.
I bet you think your husband will be back any minute. Try to go for help. There's no one for miles.
Gerald?
I'm sorry, baby. You don't get to know my name.
I don't like this. I'm serious. Stop.
I like that.
Stop it!
You play?
Is this really what it takes these days?
God, how do we go so wrong? We were happy once, weren't we?
Gerald? What? What's happening? Oh. Gerald!
Wake up. Just wake up. It's time to wake up, honey.
5 hours you've wasted screaming for neighbors that are half a mile away, if they're even here yet. How long do you think someone lives without water? That will not work. You can pull till your wrists break. You're not getting out of those cuffs.
You're not real. You're not real. Little baby, don't say a word.
Focus. You've been sleepwalking since you were 12 years old.
That's a beautiful dress.
He put you in those handcuffs way before Gerald did.
You all right? You all right, Mel?
You have everything you need to survive from the beginning. You just have to remember.
Back off! If you don't wake up, you're gonna die.
Is the film we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, it just so happened I did a review on this earlier, so...
Well, since you've this will be your second time reviewing the film, would you like to give a rundown of what Gerald's game is about?
No, I don't want... No, I'm kidding. Okay,
No.
We're not that for you.
No, you're playing Nick's game here. You've got no choice. I've handcuffed you to the microphone, and it's your only way out.
You realize these come off, right?
Yeah. Damn it.
Why are they fuzzy?
You don't need to worry about that.
Okay. Well, anyways, bondage and BDSM aside.
No, actually, I think we actually have to go into that because that's part of the movie.
Aside for now.
Yes. So this is based on a Stephen King book published in the early 90s. It follows two people, a married couple. The husband's a little bit older than the wife. And they decided that their marriage hasn't been doing very well. They've been having some issues. So they want to do a getaway to their summer home. And the husband has a bit more adventurous ideas in mind because he's packed in a couple of handcuffs because he feels to help really get the arousal in their intimacy, they need to reenact a rape fantasy. So he handcuffs her to the bed, and in the process, obviously, she gets really uncomfortable. There's some things that are being hinted at about the way that she reacts to it that we'll talk about in the spoiler section. And while they have this huge fight over it, he dies. Pretty much has a heart attack in the middle of the argument because he's been taking Viagra and it's assumed that it's overstimulating his heart. And he pretty much he's dead, and it leaves her handcuffed to the bed. No one for miles around to help them. No one to come to the house for another week, at least several days before anyone can even come visit them. And the door's left open, so there's a wild dog that's ran into the house.
Yeah, so a lot of obstacles for her to come over.
Yeah, and the fact too that, obviously health reasons, if she doesn't get food and water in a reasonable amount of time, she's very likely just going to die right there on the bed.
Most of the water.
Yeah, well, I mean, that dog wasn't sharing a lot of Gerald. He was very stingy with it, I feel like.
That's just so sad to watch your husband being eaten in front of you, by this wild dog that you tried to feed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That sucks.
That's just a kick in the nuts,
But, and that's the sad thing, I don't want to hate dogs in movies or TV shows, but I wanted to kick that little turd.
No, this dog pretty much was, a main, antagonist in this movie.
Yeah, and as far as the main players of Gerald's game, we have Carla, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, Gugino. Okay, Carla Gugino is playing the wife, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but
I'll pull it up. Go ahead, though. So
Jessie, I think, is her name.
Mouse.
Yes.
And Bruce Greenwood is playing Gerald, the titular Gerald, who gets a lot more screen time than one might think in a movie where you die in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, although at the same time, even though he's the titular character, he's not the main character.
Nope. And we have, of course, some other actors that play heavily in the flashbacks. I actually like, what was her name that played her mom? Was it Katie? Oh. Was that Katie Seagal in that scene?
I think Katie Seagal, not Seagal, I think.
Or Katie Seagal, that's right. I keep saying Seagal.
Katie Seagal is Leela from Futurama. That was definitely not her.
Yeah. Which it was cool because I actually thought wow, they actually kind of look like they might be siblings, or that they actually kind of look alike.
Mm-hmm.
So in the flashbacks, it was actually oh, that definitely does look kind of like a relation, an older relation. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and then the dad is Henry Thomas from E.T., the little boy from that.
Oh, really? Oh.
That makes some uncomfortable jokes there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm going to make some uncomfortable, finger jokes there.
Henry Thomas has been around a lot, and he previously worked with this guy for, I believe, because they did the Ouija sequel together, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yes, Origin of Evil. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Because the director of this is the same director of Hush and Oculus. Yeah. And another Katie Seagal reference with Hush, previous Netflix and Kill we did, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that was one that was one of our first ones, actually. Yep. Yeah. Now that I think about it, Mike Flanagan was the director of those films, and this one does have some similarities with Hush in the fact that it's very isolated in one location.
Mm-hmm.
Flanagan likes to specialize in very limited conceits. Even Oculus is all within the house, and Ouija's all in the house, and this is all in the bedroom, so he likes to work with very limited, confined horror. That's what it seems to me.
Yeah, and I was reminded, the cinematography, well, it's not as good here, probably because there's just only one room to work with.
Yeah.
But I was very impressed with the cinematography in Hush, with, how many, how big the house could feel, just shooting this one house, how many different ways the shots could go. Yeah. And I guess it was just a little more limited with just when you're stuck in one bedroom for most of this film.
Right, we barely ever see.
Having said that, it's not bad looking. They managed to get a lot of space and depth within the shots. It's just, it's not it's nothing you've never seen before.
No, but they do some fun things with lighting when they keep switching in between night and day, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, once we hit the dream sequences, we get some really artistic stuff. Because, of course, Jessie starts to hallucinate, and that's where she actually starts to talk to her now dead husband and a version of herself.
Yes.
So that's where a lot of the acting comes in this film, is that the room actually starts to get surprisingly crowded for a room that only has one person and a dog in it.
Yeah, but after a while you actually start seeing multiple versions of her husband at once, plus her doppelganger, and then the dog.
Well, it's kind of like...
I wanted to see that little guy from Twin Peaks just doppelganger.
Well, it's her working through her own psychological issues so that she can kind of, either psych herself up to, either figure out certain ways out of her situation, or to at least, help her survive, and basically kind of everything. All the flashbacks kind of relate to, at least near the end, something that would try and help her get out of the situation. Although some of them felt very long to get there.
Hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, we also should mention the fact that she is handcuffed to the bed, and these aren't sexy, kinky handcuffs. These are just straight up real handcuffs.
Oh, they are so noobs to BDSM. Such noobs. No safe words.
No
totally wrong
discussion
handcuffs.
beforehand.
just complete amateur hour. At least in my opinion, in my learned opinion.
Okay, I'm going to think twice about shaking your hand whenever I actually meet you.
I mean, you should do that no
Knowing
matter
about the kind
what.
of things
Let's face it.
just knowing the kind of stuff that you're into, buddy. Just,
Well, look, I mean, she's gonna get problems with her circulation. Like those cuffs are actual metal. Like it's just not poorly. It's just poorly planned.
It is.
I'm just gonna say.
No, and that's one thing I liked about this was showing the realism of the physics of the situation. Because I mean, yeah, like some people argued me before, it's like, well, why couldn't she just slip the handcuffs off the stands or whatever? It's like, well, because you have to consider the space between her and her arms as they're stretched out, the way the cuffs are being blocked by the rings on the stand, and the physics of them cutting off the circulation in her hand. Like it felt very believable.
Plus,
that she would be.
She's already stretched out. I mean, there's not a whole lot of momentum room for her to go up.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it does look like they're barely, like the wood is just barely large enough, like where it's blocking the handcuffs. So like maybe if she had enough leverage to get to push on it, she might have gotten them out of there. The problem is she's stuck with both hands. So even if it was possible, I don't think she can get the leverage behind it.
Well, and also they said that it's reinforced wood because there's that one fake out moment where they're like, oh, she could just break off the wood, right? And it's like, well, no, this is some pretty sturdy material that she's working with here. So
yeah, there's also like it's hard to tell sometimes when stuff is actually real and what's happening because everything is very played that it is real until it's revealed that she is hallucinating still. So some of it is just like her thinking through what needs to be done.
Right. But some of it is just her thinking, I escaped. It's like, yeah, but you imagined all that.
And yeah, Carla Gugino does a really good job in this, I think. She's a really...
I think this is the best thing she's ever done.
No, it's really good for her.
I mean, I like to think of it as the when they first came in, I was kind of like, well, I thought you wanted to try and do something adventurous and push some boundaries. Please, I did that in the Spy Kids films. you think Antonio Banderas was boring in the sack? No way.
Well, I mean, she was in Watchmen where she almost got raped too in that one scene.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Another weird mother-daughter awkward relationship. Must be her forte.
Yeah, and the least convincing old age makeup ever.
And Bruce Greenwood, like the only thing I can recognize him immediately from is that he's the voice of Batman from Young Justice. Like that's my immediate thought.
Oh yeah, no, he's a character actor I love. Like I see him pop up in so many roles. Like usually plays dads or lawyers or public figures because he has that very kind of authoritative look to him. So it's kind of nice to see him doing something that's not just run of the mill Bruce Greenwood type. I mean, he's only in it for so long, but I really thought that he did a good job in the role that he had.
He's in most of the movies still.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact that it's a limited role because he has to play different facets of the same character to the point where, the projections aren't really Bruce Greenwood. They're the projections of what she thinks he is based on her hallucinations. So, he has to really play different, personalities and facets of himself throughout this role.
It's interesting too, because they actually point out the fact that she is super observant. Like, to know the information she does, where it's like, oh, but the grass was cut and all this stuff was done, that means that nothing's gonna happen here, and she's like running through her head. I'm like, okay, most people wouldn't even notice half that shit you mentioned. Like, just makes you actually a very super observant character.
Yeah, it's just the fact that her dick of a husband's hallucination has to yell at her about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the acting for Bruce Greenwood as well. I mean, he's more of a caricature of the dick husband than anything else. But that's not surprising considering it's just a manifestation of what she thought he was. And then, of course, it's she has a hallucination of herself as like a stronger type character that is much more cool and collected.
That's like walking her through it.
Yeah. So very interesting from a psychological perspective.
Well, yeah, because this whole movie is just one giant metaphor. Like, the way that you look at the narrative, everything is a metaphor for about, what's going on in her head. Even the actual literal plot itself is just representative of the shackles that she's bound to, of her abuse, of her, submission to authority, to other people dominating her life kind of thing. It's just all about the message of what's being communicated.
It's one giant character piece, is what the movie is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really... it's her working up her own kind of courage too, because she needs to basically not only figure out a way out of here, but once she figures out like if these are the things I need to do to survive, can I do them? Do I have the tools to get out of here? Like, what do I have necessary? Like, she has one point where she's like, well, I need water to survive. Like, oh wait, holy shit, he put some water on the shelf that I now remember, but I can't quite get to it. And then she makes a makeshift straw. Like, it's very interesting. Like, the little victories are very important, that you can kind of like put yourself in the scenario with the character and go like, whew, okay, I would probably not even have thought of that.
No.
And I would have totally been
dead in the doorway.
I would have been dead even before this point, probably.
Well, and nothing felt overdone with the scale of the problems. You know what I mean? Like, it all felt like there were workable problems with workable solutions. They were hard solutions, but nothing was like, there's no real stretches in logic for the most part, I felt.
No.
Yeah, and other than that, it's kind of hard to talk about the rest of this film without going into too much of a spoiler thing. But
we
I guess
could talk about her first night that happened, I think.
The first night.
Well, okay, here's something we can at least we can allude to some of the details about things that are in the story, like because there's three main obstacles to her in this story.
Mm-hmm.
There's the actual physical threat of being locked up and starving or dying of thirst. There's the dog, who's slowly but surely making his way past the husband to trying to take a bite out of her. And then there's the third thing, which I will say, again, this will be something we talk about in the later section. It's probably my least favorite part of the movie, is the whole mystery of what that third detail, that third element is.
Really? I really like that part.
I liked it, except for the part in the end when they answer the question of if it's actually happening or not.
Oh.
And I'm not going to say what, but it's like, I kind of liked it better when I thought it was just another thing in her head. Some other physical manifestation of her thoughts.
See, that was the interesting aspect to me as well. But I actually did like the ending point too, where they put a actual stamp on what it was. So we'll get to that in the spoiler section, though.
I actually kind of spoiled it for Nick though, because I realized I read this book in high school.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
And by in high school, I mean freshman year.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I was probably a little too young to actually be reading this at the time, because I remember vaguely like, I'm pretty sure I read this book, because I went through a major Stephen King reading phase when I was in freshman year. I'm like, seems like I remember this book. I remember something about weird things happening and being chained up. That's all I really remember. And the more I actually watch this movie, the more I'm like, holy fuck, I think I actually repressed this whole entire book. Yep, because the more I was watching, I'm like, yep, I remember what happens next. Yep, I remember what next. Oh god, this happens next. So I actually physically repressed this book from my memory.
And and that's going to be a thing for a lot of audience members, is that this is a hard watch if you've had any relation to any of the problems. Obviously you're probably not going to relate well to being handcuffed or chained, but especially when they start getting to the flashbacks about what happened to her and the abuse that she suffered, it's not the worst case of anything I've ever heard or discussed in a story. But I openly admit I had to fast forward through one scene, the one scene that they show in this movie, where I'm just like, okay, I appreciate that it's very artfully composed and trying to be restrained, but it was just too much for me, personally.
It's not a very comfortable scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's meant to be uncomfortable, too. That's the point. It's effective in the sense that it is making you uncomfortable, but yeah, too effective.
Yeah, I found the scene,
her escape scene.
Yeah, I found one of the scenes, any scene dealing with her, her father in the past was actually very uncomfortable. But one of the ones where he's bargaining with her at a certain point is pretty messed up.
That's some college thesis. Yeah, that's a thesis level discussion on the manipulation he's using against her.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's got a lot of that to deal with. Obviously, that reflects on her husband that she married, how she married an older guy, and it's she even has he has the same job as her dad did, right?
I think so.
So she's working a lot of she's actually working through a lot of her issues while she's chained up to the bed. Now that she's got time, basically.
But she can't run away. That was kind of a big thing, is that they made sure it's you always just run away from your problems.
Yeah, and in a certain aspect, she has run away in her own mind, sort of. Although, I do like the fact that she uses her own retreat as, like, most people, they would retreat into their own mind in the situation just to escape. But she actually uses it to...
Literally help her escape.
Yeah, literally help her escape, because she's, she thinks of herself as a person that is too weak to deal with this problem on her own. So she kind of imagines herself as the stronger person.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I kind of like that idea of finding your inner stronger self. And, all the information that the hallucinations are giving her, information that she must know in some point, at some subconscious level.
Yep.
So you got to figure that she's making some real smart decisions throughout most of this. I think the movie has a very, interesting ending. I will say that at a certain aspect, it feels a little long. Like, it's like, oh, are we not wrapped up yet?
It's like a 10-minute epilogue, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a big epilogue, a lot of falling action. But it is like wrapping up a lot of, like, this is not, it's like not the interesting part of the story, but it's like a significant portion of the story.
Well, it's showing her actual character growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I get why they did it. It was just not my favorite part of the movie, so I can agree in that sense.
I think it's important one way or the other.
Yeah.
As far as Stephen King references, of course, they call the dog Cujo at some point.
There's so many Stephen King references.
That was funny. I
think there's actually a reference to another, like, a solar eclipse scene in another book, at least what I was reading on here.
I think the whole well thing is another Stephen King book.
Yeah, Dolores Claiborne.
Yeah.
Like, that was when she was like, the dream she was having was a woman near a well or something.
Though I thought that scene with the dancing clown in the background was a little too obvious.
They all float down here. Oh, wait a minute. This is I'm in the wrong movie. You got your own shit going on.
You know what? No, I just want that to be a thing. Bill Skarsgård's in Castle Rock. He needs to be in every single Stephen King thing from now on. Just.
Yeah, so, I really can't talk too much about anything else. Everything else I want to discuss is we already kind of spoiled some stuff in this movie, but I don't know.
Did you see the other part of trivia, though, that the book that she threw at the dog at one point was the book that the main character in Hush was writing?
Oh, cool. That's a nice little reference.
I didn't that. Yeah. No, so I gotta ask you, Travis. Mm-hmm. So, people have always said this book is unfilmable, that the way that it's structured and that such really doesn't translate well to, or it originally would not have translated well to film. Would you have agreed to that before seeing this movie?
Actually, when Nick told me about, like, the fact we're going to watch Gerald's game, I sat there and thought about it. I'm like, I thought this would be a great book or a movie because it is shot in one location. It'd be one of those horror movies that you could just kind of put down in a room and go, okay, we're going to do it all here. So I actually thought it would be a perfectly good movie.
Okay.
Like, I was not surprised at all. Like, this basically played out exactly how I imagined it playing out.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I would mention is that the pacing is obviously, I'm not sure how the book goes, but
it's slow.
It's definitely the pacing of the movie feels a little bit more like a movie that was adapted from a book. I'm like, okay, I can feel some of these sections were probably a lot longer in the book. Like some of these hallucinations and flashbacks and stuff.
From what I do remember of the book, I feel like this is faithful to it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
But again, it's been a while, and again, I think I repressed it, so.
Yeah. No, from what I saw, I looked up some details, and a lot of there's actually fewer changes than I expected from what I understood. Like, the only thing that changed were a few details about the ending, and then a few, like, I think, they trimmed down a couple sequences and such, but on the whole, the structure of it is actually pretty, almost, very, very similar.
Yeah, I think
having done my research.
I think one part of the ending was different than I at least remembered it being.
Yeah, but we won't say what exactly. But I will say also, objectively, again, this movie doesn't do anything groundbreaking with cinematography or editing or sound mixing or music, but it's all competently well done. It's like, this is a solidly executed product, especially with the budget they had for this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it's definitely solid. Anything else anyone wanted to mention before we just go into final thoughts and ratings then? Because I do kind of want to get right to the spoiler section.
Yeah. Okay, I will say I was so happy to see the one big cameo. Again, this thing that we cannot talk about, but there's a cameo that's very notable that they mentioned here, and I'm like, oh, I know that actor! And I cannot wait to tell you who it is in the spoiler section.
All right, well, without further ado, let's get to that then. I actually really enjoyed this movie for what it was. It's it's like restrictive, but in a good way. Like not only the main characters is restrictive, but the camera is very restrictive. We only escape that room when the character escapes into her own mind. It's it does make you feel very sympathetic to her situation. It's hard, like, to, I don't know, like, I mean, there's a certain point where there is a hard to, like, hard to watch scene near the end with, like, especially if you don't like gore or, are very uncomfortable with that sort of thing.
Okay, it made us uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I've watched stuff like Hostel, and I'm just like, well, some of that is maybe it is because of the fact that it's just so personal. I feel so there with the character that it's just hard to not, like, sympathize and go like, oh crap, like, I guess that is something I'd have to do if I wanted to get out of that situation. But I feel like that the pacing is not, it's definitely changed to fit more with a movie standard. It's still a little weird, especially near the end with that epilogue where it's just kind of like, oh well, the main story is pretty much done. It's hard to, like, it's weird watching the context of it. Like, it should be like really big, like a big, like, reveal, like, holy shit. But it's kind of played like it's not that big a deal.
No, it's more just the conclusion of her story than anything.
And, like, in another movie, I'm not sure if I wanted it to be much more of a big, like, gotcha or what it was. But I'm gonna give this one a solid 3.5 out of 5. How's about that? You get 3.5 for having the boldness to have a dick dog in the story. No one has an asshole dog.
It's a one time where it's like, if the dog would have died, we'd be okay with it.
Yeah, fuck that dog. 'Cause, man, wouldn't it be hard? Like, it's hard enough, like, your significant other dies in front of you. You gotta watch them get eaten, their face get eaten up.
Yeah.
What about you, Travis? What do you think?
Let's let Justin go first on this one.
You go, Justin, go? Alright, Justin, what do you think?
Okay. I mean, I really don't have a lot to complain, like, objectively per se. Like, again, it's not so much that it did anything new that I had never seen before, but it did everything well. Like, I equate this on the level of something like Misery, where it's like, Misery had at least, the really great performance of Kathy Bates that really made it stand out, and everything else was good. That was the one thing that was truly great about the movie. And this one, I could say, is like, yeah, Carla Gugino, I think, is great in this movie. And there's some great stuff discussed with the themes and the tone and the plot. But it's all stuff that we've seen in other Stephen King products. It's just done with the professionalism of a director who really understood the book. And from what I understand, this is a book that Mike Flanagan, the director, really, really pushed for. He's just like, I like this book. I like the story. I think it can be done. You just have to be patient and trust me in this. And, it really showed that he had really good control on the type of story he wanted to tell. Again, the only complaints I had were the way the story ended in terms of one certain plot detail. And again, it's one of the things where I get exactly what it means and I appreciate the thing that it's representing metaphorically, but I felt that it ruined a little bit of some of the mystique in the story. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I really enjoyed the story. I would give it a solid 4 out of 5 pounds of really expensive meat. That's $600 a cut or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Colby beef that their Colby steak that they fed the dog earlier. Mm-hmm. Man, make sure you close your doors too.
Yeah.
What the hell was that about?
Well, I mean, if you're gonna feed a wild dog, close your doors, especially.
Well, if you're gonna have sex, like, maybe close a door eventually.
No, that was part of the adventure.
Like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I know that they're sex-starved, but they can't be that horny to not lock a door.
One of the doors.
It takes literally 2 seconds.
Well, like, there's the hallway door, there's the kitchen door, there's the bedroom door, and there's the outside door. I felt like there was one of them could have got closed.
Well, obviously one of them wasn't that horny.
Yeah. Travis, what do you think?
Oh, well, I don't know. I feel like I just have to disagree on every movie Justin likes, so I might just have to lower my rating for this one at this point. I was going to give it a pretty high score, but Justin liked it. I don't know.
Travis, help me help you. Help me help you.
And how am I supposed to do that?
I don't know. Okay. Just don't disagree with me all the time, man. I'm trying to work with you here.
No, actually, I do agree with you on this movie a lot. At almost all points except for the ending, because I actually really like the ending. But that's a minor issue, I think. Overall, I think this movie actually did a really good job with the interactions of the more or less 3 characters in the room. They did some pretty fun scenes of just explaining information to like, it would have been really stagnant if they would have, like, just kept explaining it to one character, where they kept making the other characters being like, wait, I didn't know this information, even though I'm a figment of her imagination. And I think that was kind of a fun take on it, just of how well they acted that out. So I think that made the whole entire thing feel a little less slow, because there was, it felt like the characters were realizing some information at the same time we were. So I thought that was kind of fun. Overall, this movie is very uncomfortable, and like I said, I think I like it, partially because it just started like, oh yeah, I remember this part in the book now. Yep, remember this part. Oh, I really remember this part. For Stephen King, I think he needs help, because this was not even the only book I've read from him that dealt with these issues, and I just want to like ask him, like, do you need a hug?
Do you need a hug?
You might need a hug.
Well, there was that period of time when he was super high on drugs and he was writing books, so yeah, he definitely needed a hug at some point in his career.
Overall, this movie was, I liked it a lot, actually. I'm gonna give it, actually, 8 out of 10.
8 hugs Stephen King needs out of 10.
All the hugs that Stephen King needs. All 8 of them.
So yeah, with that, I think we can go into a small musical break, and we'll be back with the spoiler section for Gerald's game right after this.
In the King's Head, I watch the castle rise. Pouty little poet with an opiate affliction. I'm a workaholic with affection, addiction. Make a dedicated reader shivery and jittery. Feel that rage and misery. You better start running, man. You're in deep poo-po. I'm a mad dog. Bank shining. Cujo. Got me knock you down till you can't stand up. You're as soft as Poe, the Kung Fu Panda. Racks on racks cause I pen fat stacks of frightening writing. Have you seen the pile? I can even take a break from my routine style. Crank at a Shawshank or a Green Mile.
And welcome to the spoiler section for Gerald's game. Okay, so the thing that we were all vaguely trying to not reference in the beginning of this review was the fact that there's a character in this film called, what was it, the Moonlight Man?
The Moonlight Man.
Where it is unclear, like at first we think, or our main character and the audience think that it's a hallucination, but it becomes a little more muddled when she sees a footprint in the blood, like what she thinks is a footprint. But I'm like, we've been seeing so much hallucinatory shit that I doubt it wouldn't take a lot for her to hallucinate a footprint too.
And I really like the scene where he first shows up, because like she hears noises and she just thinks I'm being paranoid because I'm handcuffed to a bed and it's dark.
And she's been talking to her hallucinating self, so of course it could very likely be an illusion. So
yeah, I mean that's something that you totally get paranoid. I get paranoid in the dark sometimes when I'm not handcuffed to a bed. And she just kind of like, this figure slowly like kind of creeps up from the corner and starts just approaching the bed and opens this little like man purse thing that has some jewelry in it and other things.
Yeah, and it was like, and I'm just like, okay, is this a personification of death or something? Because like even Bruce Greenwood is like, he is death come to claim you. And I'm like, well, he's a little early. Like the jackass.
Well, I mean, it draws a lot of literary comparisons, because there are stories that are like that, with like, death waiting to claim his next victim kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, I can see it's a very classic literature thing to do, to have this character.
Yeah, and of course when I was looking at him, I'm like, who's this lurch-looking motherfucker? Surprise, surprise, he's Lurch.
Yeah.
The motherfucker is actually Lurch.
Yeah, it's
from the Addams Family movies.
Carol Strucken, I think his name is, or Strucken.
Yeah, and he actually has that, what do you call it? They even mention at the end of the film where yeah, it's some sort of genetic thing where your head and hands are like larger than they're supposed to be.
Yeah, because I also recognize him from Twin Peaks. He's the tall man in that one. So
yeah. And yeah, so
he basically looks like a human personification of the Slender Man.
He kind of is.
Actually, if they were to cast a Slender Man movie, he would definitely be the guy. He plays a lot of like tall, like creepy monsters or whatever in horror films. Mm-hmm. So at the certain point where we're keep getting like one of the main things we're trying to avoid is like, okay, I'm still here for our next night, he's gonna come for me, sort of thing. And even the dog is like is fleeing, so she's like, oh my god, maybe it is death or whatever, come to claim me. And it leads to her main escape, because of course she finally remembers, she actually listens to her own past hallucination of her past self trying to get her to remember it's a lot because it's not just the scene where, because of course the scene of her father like jerking himself off during the eclipse while she sits on his lap is like bad enough. That's where most movies would leave it.
Yeah, no, this movie keeps going.
But we keep getting scenes after that. Like the one after that, of course, is the dad like really manipulating her into keeping the secret. Where it's like, we should tell the secret, and like even though your mom might blame you, I mean, we can't help that though. I mean, if we did keep it a secret, we'd have to keep it a secret forever. Some real manipulative shit.
Well,
I'm just like...
You see a scene before that even where, like, her mother clearly dislikes her.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a guy with a bag of bones in this movie that comes to people at night, and you are still the creepiest dude in this movie. Like, it's gross. And, of course, it leads to remember one scene where she actually breaks a glass after that night, and she remembers how it bled, and she's like, holy shit, I have a glass of water, I have my blood, if I can slick up my hand, I can get out of these cuffs.
So is blood actually that slick? I mean, I'm sure it is, but yeah, because the logic is that she greases her hand up enough where it can slip through the cuff with a lot of difficulty, of course, but...
Well, at a certain point, I think only the lubricant you need is only a certain amount. I think blood is actually pretty slick, unless it coagulates and actually gets sticky. I mean,
I'm not cringing at that scene.
Yeah, no,
though.
that part when she actually slipped her hand out of the cuff and like takes off half her skin. Yeah, that part I was just like, I had to audibly gag, just like, okay.
I actually couldn't watch it. I had to turn away at some point. I was like, nope, I'm going to lose it if I watch this.
It's so impactful because there's so little gore and violence in this movie that when you see something super, super intense like that, it hits you extra hard, I feel at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we see the tendons and everything. Like, it's a pretty good, I'm assuming, practical effect work that is going on there. So
I wouldn't know if it's practical or not. Couldn't watch it.
So she finally, slips out of the cuffs. She works her way out. She faints before she can get to the car. She wakes up where the dog is kind of growling and is...
it was trying to eat her first.
It was trying to eat her again. Like, what a dick dog.
What a dick indeed.
Very easily deterred, though. Not a Cujo. It was more like a regular dog that's just like, can I eat this? No? Oh, damn.
I'll wait then.
I guess we'll just try again later when you don't notice.
Then she sees, that he's growling at something off screen, and you see the Moonlight Man, just standing there in the hallway. Mm-hmm. And it's a big symbolic thing where she gives him her wedding ring, I believe. As kind of a symbolic gesture of like being released from the bonds of whatever that she was being held to. And then she actually escapes, because she has to make her way to the car. She, again, passes out before she can drive safely and crashes into a tree, but thankfully crashes nearby a home where people can get her help. So.
Well, you forget the scene that happens right as she passes out. Or when she's passing out, rather.
Oh, which was that?
Is she also goes into a scene where it's the eclipse again.
Right.
And then she looks in the rearview mirror, and the Moonlight Man is there.
Yeah.
And this is a difference from the book, I think. Or at least it was kind of inferred differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the book, he was there.
He was in the car?
He was in the back seat of the car.
Okay.
Damn.
And that's why I think I remember you kind of looking at me during that scene, because I'm like, nope, there's one more scene. Because that's what I remembered.
Well, they keep showing him, they keep doing this thing with his eyes that's actually pretty creepy. He's a pretty creepy effect and a pretty creepy character. And I do like the fact that, like, we first get to see him in reference to somebody else in the film when she finally stands next to him in the same shot. And my God, is he huge.
No, it's not just that she's huge. Carla Gugino is super short, too. Like, if you see her actual height, she's a tiny person.
So the difference is just like staggering. It's like watching walking Frodo give the ring to a giant or something. Like it's ridiculous.
But here's the thing that I alluded to why I wasn't crazy about this, because for the longest time we think, even to that point, maybe he's still a figment of her imagination. But then the film reveals very concretely and unquestionably he was actually a real person. And that this was actually a thing where he was just waiting in the house, slowly kind of making his way towards her, because he's some deranged grave robber and necrophiliac who's been on the loose for a long time and finally got caught because of all the stuff that happened with the house. So,
Yeah, and so I kind of actually really like that aspect, the fact that, like, oh, dude, that was a real dude that was in the room with her and, like, kind of fucking with her. And I think my main thing is that I think it would have played better if, I don't know, because we learned the information just because of her narration and the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the main problem with the epilogue is that not only is it very long, but the epilogue also comes with a lot of her inner monologue and narration, where, like,
that's the whole movie.
And that's the point. Like,
well,
the
rest
the
of the
whole thing
movie
is that
is
it's leading up to her writing this letter to herself. Very like self-healing thing. But yeah, no, I totally agree.
I mean, I just thought, like, what if I was trying to get, like, a more powerful image in my mind, and what if we just saw her with more context clues, like maybe the newspaper later, and then the first time we see him is in the courtroom where he first turns around, and you get the reveal, like, holy shit, he was real, and then we get the what I feel is the most important part of that epilogue, where she finally faces him.
Yes.
And she just goes up to him and sees, her past abusers, and she just, what did she say? You seemed so much larger when before, and kind of like, just finally seeing him as, like, you're just a dude, you're just a regular guy, and kind of getting over her her post-traumatic stress over it, or assuming.
Actually, though, Nick, you made a good point. Actually, I would much rather have seen that where the reveal also came with that scene, because her actually standing up to him was a great scene. But yeah, if that reveal had been so spoon-fed with exposition, if it had been a thing where she walked into the court case and realized, oh wait, that guy actually was real this whole time, and then we have the flashback revealing the clues showing that he was a real person. Because other than that, the only hint we get in the story is early on when they're driving to the house, where they're like, oh, there's a report of some grave robbery that was going on. And that was literally the only thing that would have indicated that he was a real person otherwise.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of, like, why does the scene not have as much punch to it than it probably should? Because, like, even when she's going into the thing, it's just like, hey, he hasn't spoken in this long, and, like, it's so, like, and then they go into his backstory of, like, he actually killed his sister and her husband and called them mother. There's so much detail that I'm like, this was definitely the epilogue of the book, where it had probably worked a little bit better in a book format where everything was from her perspective, so the narration doesn't feel weird.
From what I heard, people weren't too crazy about it in the book either. And I think the problem is that they took a thing that was a metaphor and turned it into a character. I think that's part of the problem, is taking something that is such a mystery, and it is so representative, because it is a thing like, yes, the specter of death and the inevitability of fate kind of thing. And then you go, well, actually, there's all this backstory that you didn't know, and we get it in the last 5 minutes of the movie. I think that was just, it was a little too much.
I actually disagree on that part, because I actually think that this was an important element of the metaphor, because the actual important of the metaphor was that, for this book at least, was that there are no monsters, that it is just people that are the monsters, because everything in her life, all the bad things that happened to her, were just because of people and not anything else.
I suppose that also has a aspect to it as well. I mean, I feel like we could have gotten that with, I don't know, for me, I feel like that sequence is very long, and I feel like the most important and very important part is the courtroom scene.
Yeah, it is.
And
I actually do agree.
And I feel like we could have cut down some of that exposition to get to that courtroom scene a little faster. And it would have had it, because by the time we get there, the emotional impact of, like, holy shit, he was real, has kind of faded.
Yeah.
Because she's gone through, like, all of his backstory and really, made him sort of a regular dude.
And I'm sure that it is just less annoying to me, because I did read the book, and I did know throughout the movie that this is real.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Like, if they had intercut it more, like if they didn't, dump it all in the beginning first, if it had been kind of a gradual reveal as you saw him, and then it's referring back to all the stuff, that probably, if it had been paced better, probably would have been a little bit stronger. So, yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. Or maybe show that scene first and then explain his backstory, like with one of the reporters giving it a little rundown of what he was or something. I don't know. There's something weird that makes me emotionally disconnect from that scene, that I'm feel like this is like a very important scene in the movie, and I'm not as emotionally invested in it as I probably should be.
The part when he broke his handcuffs, I was just like, oh, jeez.
That was weird. Jesus. You are made of moonlight.
Which, that's a pretty arty statement, which I'm like, he's very eloquent for a guy who has clear cerebral damage and all that stuff.
Well, he was just repeating back what she said to him at first, right?
Yeah, but the fact that he couldn't say it in such a way where it's like, it still sounds profound, even from a guy who's mentally challenged.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's basically Gerald's game. We spoiled it, and speaking of Maid of Moonlight, we're going to fade into the night as
right.
well,
Good night, everybody.
as it were. Thank you so much for joining us, Justin.
With some actual fluffy handcuffs.
Indeed. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to check out some of our back catalog, definitely check out some of our, previous Netflix and kills, as well as, some of our regular episodes of the UGO podcast on UGO Podcast on iTunes. Subscribe to us while you're there. Maybe give us a 5-star review while you're there. We would definitely appreciate it. Check us out on Facebook or maybe on Twitter at UGO Podcast, or on our Instagram at the same thing. We'll have some con pictures to put up there pretty soon. Justin, where can the people find you?
You can finally, hopefully not handcuffed to your bed, but you will probably likely find me more at oneofus.net. I write the notes for the subscriber-only podcast, The Breakfast Pub. We talk about the trailers for the week, the big news stories, things that are entertaining, it's a general catch-up of all the week's events in entertainment. Otherwise, you can find me on Facebook and on Twitter.
All right, well, thank you. And with that, this game is at an end, and time to unlock those handcuffs, Travis. Come on.
Oh, thank God.
Quit playing around. Give me the keys. Give me those goddamn keys, man.
I don't know. I think he looks comfortable there. Let's just leave him, Travis.
Oh my God, no! We're on a Haunted Geek Out end. We're out. Emphasis on the let me out.